Spain overtakes China as its death toll rises to 3,434. This after 738 people died in the last 24 hours. Also, the world's largest democracy heads into lockdown as India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi orders people to stay home for the next 21 days, a massive challenge for a nation where millions are destitute. And the death toll in France from the pandemic now surpasses more than 1,000, making it the fifth country in the world to do so. However, the official toll does not yet take into account people dying at home or at nursing complexes. Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. And we begin in Spain, where the coronavirus death toll has overtaken that of China. It has risen to 3,434 after 738 people died in the last 24 hours. The spiralling number of deaths coming as Spain entered its 11th day of an unprecedented lockdown. This as the government attempts to rein in the outbreak that has now infected close to 47,000 Spaniards. Sarah Morris in Madrid has more.
The number of people affected with coronavirus is now almost 48,000 and the number of deaths has risen by 700 people in the last 24 hours. That means that 3,434 Spaniards have died from the coronavirus. That is more than China that has recorded 3,300 deaths. That has come as fairly shocking news for the Spaniards, and many of them attribute it to cuts in the health service and the years of austerity. The Spaniards are pretty proud of their hospitals, but they're very aware that the doctors and nurses are complaining that protective masks and equipment are not getting through. They've been listening to an interview by Ursula von der Leyen with the Spanish state television, and she has actually promised that there will be more masks and equipment sent in the next 2 weeks. But of course, that is worrying news for the Spaniards as these figures continue to climb. And today the MPs will vote in the Parliament to actually extend that lockdown until April the 11th. Most of the political parties have backed that proposed extension by the Socialist and United left government, but there are some dissenters that feel that those measures don't go far enough.
Sarah Morris reporting there from Madrid, And in the last hour, it's been revealed that Prince Charles, the heir to the British throne, has tested positive for the coronavirus. The 71-year-old showing mild symptoms, however, and is self-isolating at a royal estate in Scotland. His wife Camilla having tested negative. Buckingham Palace saying that Queen Elizabeth remains at her home in Windsor. And India, which has joined the growing list of countries going into lockdown as part of stepped-up efforts to confront the coronavirus, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announcing the country will stay in confinement for 3 weeks. It's a massive challenge in a nation where hundreds of millions of people are destitute. So far, there have been 519 confirmed cases and 10 reported deaths in India. Catherine Viette reports.
New Delhi, now a ghost town. The highways, usually clogged with traffic, nearly deserted. It's unprecedented for this city of 29 million inhabitants. That's because India, with its 1.3 billion people, has been placed in lockdown by the country's prime minister.
संपूर्ण देश में संपूर्ण लॉकडाउन होने जा रहा है। हिंदुस्तान को बचाने के लिए, हिंदुस्तान के हर नागरिक को बचाने के लिए, आपको बचाने के लिए, आपके परिवार को बचाने के लिए।
Non-essential businesses are to be shut. All air and train travel are to be cancelled, and a curfew will be put in place. Since the start of the coronavirus epidemic, India has gradually introduced stricter measures. The government already ordered all schools and universities to close. Now Indians seem to be embracing the Prime Minister's directive.
हमको अपनी कंट्री को बचाना हो और वो लेवल तक नहीं ले जाना हो, तो मैं बोलूँगा सब घर पे रहे और अपनी सुरक्षा कीजिए और सबकी सुरक्षा अपनी सुरक्षा।
But India faces several challenges ahead. Around 220 million people live in poverty, packed together in slums, and not all have access to health care. But with half the population under 25, that could help minimize the health impact of the pandemic.
Moving on, and President Donald Trump and the US Senate have finally agreed on an economic relief package worth more than $1.8 trillion. The stimulus package, including money to bail out industries that have been affected by the crisis. This comes as President Trump is continuing to express eagerness to get as many people back to work in the coming weeks.
The Senate and the House, we seem to be getting along as much as you can get along. We seem to be getting along now on a bill. I think that maybe had even less of an impact than the fact that we're opening up this incredible country, because we have to do that.
And staying in America, and cases of the virus have spiralled in New York recently, with the state becoming the centre of the epidemic in the US. More than 25,000 cases have been confirmed, but with limited access to testing, many more are believed to be infected. Fraser Jackson reports.
The city that never sleeps is growing restless as the number of COVID-19 cases in New York State explode. Well over 25,000 people have tested positive for the novel coronavirus, meaning that if New York was a country, it would be the 6th most infected country in the world. Governor Andrew Cuomo is begging the federal government to do more to help.
We need, at a minimum, an additional 30,000 ventilators. You have 20,000 ventilators in the stockpile. Release the ventilators to New York. How can we be in a situation where you can have New Yorkers possibly dying because they can't get a ventilator, but a federal agency saying, I'm going to leave the ventilators in the stockpile?
So far, the federal government has sent 4,000 ventilators to New York, but Cuomo said that doesn't go far enough.
You pick the 26,000 people who are going to die.
With the peak of the epidemic expected in a few weeks, state authorities project 40,000 people will need a bed in intensive care. That far outstrips the 3,000 available. President Donald Trump has said he thinks response to the virus has been blown out of proportion, and he hopes to get back to business soon.
We've never closed the country before, and we've had some pretty bad flus, and we've had some pretty bad viruses. I would love to have the country opened up and just raring to go by Easter.
Trump later softened that stance, saying he hoped to have portions of the country back to normal. That might be wishful thinking, as the outbreak is only expected to get worse in the coming weeks. The World Health Organization said on Tuesday the United States had the potential to become the global epicenter of the pandemic.
And as we know, parts of Italy have been devastated with the COVID-19 outbreak. Hospitals in the north of the country are already saturated and in desperate need of respirators. But an Italian startup recently stepped in to help provide essential respirator parts. Our tech reporter Julia Seeger has more.
One of the main problems hospitals face in Europe and around the world is the lack of respirators to take care of severe cases of COVID-19. Italy has surpassed China in the number of deaths, but I want to tell you about what can happen when imaginative people decide to help one another. Now, a hospital in Brescia, northern Italy, was running out of valves after treating patients of COVID-19, and the usual supplier, called Intersurgical, allegedly said that they could not make the valves in time to treat the patients. So two Italian engineers, Christian Fracassi and Alexandro Romaglio, who work for an Italian startup called Isinova, decided to 3D print the respirator parts for free.
I wanted to do this video to update you about the production of the 3D printed valves. So these one in particular are called Venturi valves. Inside of this tube, and sometimes even inside of that tube there, is pure oxygen that enters through the holes that you can see on the side.
Now, it was first reported that the manufacturing company Intersurgical had threatened to sue the two Italians because the valves were patent, but it later appeared that all they refused to give was the actual design files due to medical manufacturing regulations, which actually forced the two Italians to reverse engineer the parts. Now, the valves usually cost $11,000, but the Italian duo was able to make a replica for about $1. And after making that first project, they decided why not go further and make respirators altogether. And that's how they had the idea with a doctor from the hospital in Brescia to adapt a full-face snorkeling mask that's made by the French company Decathlon. And all they had to do was 3D print 2 other valves to be placed on the top of the mask for oxygen, but also for the reservoir. Now, the French company Decathlon has said that it has the mask in stock, and the hospital in Brescia has also said that it has ordered 500 of these masks, which are going to help save lives in Italy.
Here in France, the death toll from the coronavirus pandemic has now surpassed more than 1,000, making it the 5th country in the world to do so. However, the official toll does not take into account as yet people dying at home or at nursing homes. The French health minister is saying that the initial period of a 2-week lockdown will likely need to be extended.
1 week into lockdown, France's streets remain eerily empty. Confined to their homes and only allowed to leave for a select few reasons, the French population make up a small chunk of the more than 2.6 billion people worldwide being told to stay home. After consulting the Scientific Council advising the government, Health Minister Olivier Véran said the 2-week confinement period could likely be extended until the end of April.
À tous les membres du Conseil scientifique, personne n'est capable de vous dire avec précision si le confinement doit être de temps, de telle durée ou de telle durée. Ils ont dit qu'il faut peut-être se préparer à ce que le confinement dure. Au-delà de 15 jours, nous le savons, mais peut-être qu'il pourrait s'étendre jusqu'à une date plus lointaine de l'ordre de 5 ou 6 semaines.
As infections in France surpassed 20,000, the body advising Macron's government said tracing and isolating each case had become unfeasible, and that confinement measures such as those in place are the only real way to deal with the outbreak. It added that at least 3 weeks of confinement would be needed before any evaluation of its impact could be made. With France only testing those with severe symptoms, the true number of infections could be much higher than reported. Also skewed, the number of fatalities. Official figures only include those who died in public hospitals, but several care homes have reported deaths in the double digits. The government said new tallies including these figures will be available in the next few days, which will likely show a sharp increase in registered fatalities. Across the country, families have been stopped from visiting their loved ones in a bid to stop the virus spreading through the vulnerable population. Experts fear the epidemic could end up causing more than 100,000 deaths in elderly care homes.
And the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo has closed the country's borders and imposed a state of emergency to contain the outbreak there. The virus is spreading quickly across Africa, infecting more than 1,700 people in 45 nations, challenging already very fragile healthcare systems. In recent days, Senegal and Ivory Coast declared their own states of emergency. And China has lifted tough restrictions on the province at the epicentre of the outbreak after a 2-month-long lockdown. This as the country reports no new domestic cases. The lockdown lifted then on more than 50 million people in Hubei province, with residents now allowed to leave the region if healthy, and some airports and train stations reopening. The city of Wuhan, the initial epicentre of the outbreak, will allow residents to leave from April the 8th. China reporting 47 new infections in the last 24 hours. However, all of them were imported infections from overseas, mostly Chinese nationals returning home. And that's it for this edition. Do stay with us here on France 24.